Hi, I'm Sarah. Today I'm reading you Tiffany's story. It's titled like this. At Christmas dinner, my parents gave my sister an apartment, then handed me the mortgage papers. Prove you love your sister, they said. I refused. A month later, they sued me for $280,000, but the judge asked them a few questions. So let's begin. My name is Tiffany. I'm 32 years old, and I honestly believed this Christmas would be completely ordinary. The same house, the same decorations, and the same familiar family tension. But I was very wrong. Let me explain my family first. My mom is 58, my dad is 61, and they've been married for 35 years. They still live in the house where we grew up. Then there's my younger sister, Sarah. She's 27, 5 years younger than me, but you'd never guess it by the way my parents treat her. In our family, she's clearly the favorite. She has a boyfriend named Jake. They've been together for about 2 years. He's polite enough, but he constantly tries to impress my parents. Growing up, it was always about Sarah. When I wanted to join the drama club in high school, my mom said we couldn't afford it. 3 years later, when Sarah asked for dance lessons, the money somehow appeared. After I graduated, I worked extremely hard to earn a full college scholarship. For Sarah, my parents paid her tuition without hesitation. Over time, I learned to accept it. That was our family dynamic. Sarah was the golden child, and I was the responsible one who supposedly didn't need help. On Christmas Eve, I drove to my parents' house. The entire extended family was already there. Uncle Mike, Aunt Janet, my cousins Tom and Lisa, and Grandma Rose. Everyone was drinking eggnog, laughing loudly, and talking over each other, just like every year. Mom hugged me at the door and asked about my job. I told her work was going well. I work in marketing for a tech company, earn a solid income, rent an apartment, and have been saving to buy my own place. She smiled, said that was nice, and immediately looked past me to see if Sarah had arrived. I went into the kitchen to help with dinner and noticed something strange. My parents kept exchanging quiet smiles. When Sarah finally arrived with Jake, they became even more excited and started whispering. Sarah herself seemed different. She looked confident, almost glowing, like she knew something the rest of us didn't. She kept laughing and touching Jake's arm. I asked her if everything was okay. She smiled and said she was doing great and that the night was going to be amazing. I didn't think much of it. I assumed maybe Jake was planning to propose. Dinner started around 7 p.m. The table looked perfect. Mom had used her best dishes, Dad carved the turkey, Uncle Mike told his usual jokes, and Grandma Rose complained about her joints. Everything felt normal. Halfway through the meal, Mom suddenly stood up and tapped her glass. She asked for everyone's attention and announced that she and Dad had a surprise they'd been planning for months. Dad stood beside her, smiling proudly, and then they said it. They had bought a two-bedroom apartment in Riverside Heights for Sarah. The room exploded with applause and cheers. Sarah jumped up, pretending to be shocked, even though it was obvious she already knew. My parents explained the apartment was closing next week, in a great area with a view of the park. Everyone started asking questions and congratulating her. Sarah showed photos on her phone, clearly taken earlier. She hugged my parents and talked about how perfect it was, especially since she and Jake needed more space. Dad hinted that a wedding was coming, and the cheering started all over again. I clapped along, but my hands felt stiff. They had bought her an apartment. I'd been saving for years to afford one myself, and they handed her one without question. Mom asked me if I was happy for her. I said yes, because I didn't know what else to say. Sarah hugged me and talked about hosting a housewarming party. Inside, I felt sick. They had never given me anything close to this. The rest of dinner focused entirely on the apartment, how Sarah would decorate it, Jake's commute, and how proud my parents were. No one asked about my life. As always, everything revolved around Sarah. Later, people moved into the living room. The men watched football, the women admired apartment photos, and the kids played with their gifts. I helped Mom clean up, commenting politely on how nice the apartment was. About an hour later, she asked me to come into the kitchen. Dad was already there, holding a folder. Both of them looked serious. Dad handed me the folder. Inside were mortgage papers, loan details, and payment schedules. When I asked why I was being given these documents, Mom calmly explained that they had only paid the down payment. They expected me to cover the rest. They said I had savings and a good income, and that this was how I could prove I loved my sister. I told them I was saving that money to buy my own apartment. Mom said family should support each other. I refused. Dad became angry and said I didn't even need my own place because I was single, had no partner, and no future plans. He said Sarah deserved the apartment more than I did. I waited for Mom to defend me, but she stayed silent. I said again that I wasn't paying the mortgage. Dad called me selfish. I grabbed my coat and left. When Sarah asked where I was going, I said I wasn't feeling well and went home. That night, I cried alone in my apartment, thinking about how unequal things had always been. The next morning, Mom called and accused me of embarrassing them. She said I needed to sign the papers and start paying. I refused again and hung up. Calls and messages followed, but I ignored them. The next day, Sarah called and accused me of being cruel. She said I could always save again later. I told her she didn't understand what she was asking. She said sisters should help each other. I ended the call and blocked all of them. For a month, everything was quiet. I finally felt at peace. I went back to planning my own future and believed the issue was over. I was wrong. On a Tuesday morning in late January, I checked my mail and found something unexpected. That morning, mixed in with the usual bills and advertisements, there was a large, official-looking envelope addressed to me. My stomach tightened the moment I saw it. I hadn't ordered anything, and I wasn't expecting mail from anyone important. I took it upstairs, sat at my kitchen table, and opened it carefully. Inside were legal documents, not letters, not notices, court papers. My parents were suing me. They were demanding $280,000, claiming I had verbally agreed to take responsibility for Sarah's mortgage and had later backed out. I read the pages again and again, hoping I was misunderstanding something. But it was clear. They had actually taken legal action against me. I felt shocked, angry, and oddly calm all at once. I had expected pressure, guilt, maybe more arguments. I never imagined they would sue their own daughter. After a few minutes of sitting there in silence, I called a lawyer. I explained everything, starting from Christmas dinner. He listened carefully and told me not to panic. According to him, their case sounded weak, especially if there was no written agreement. Over the next few weeks, the situation became very real. I was formally served, court dates were scheduled, and I had to gather bank statements, messages, and records showing that I had never agreed to pay anything. During that time, my parents didn't reach out personally. All communication went through their lawyer. It felt cold and distant, like I was dealing with strangers. The day of the hearing arrived faster than I expected. I took the morning off work and went to the courthouse with my lawyer. Sitting in the waiting area, I saw my parents and Sarah walk in together. Sarah looked upset, but my parents avoided looking at me. No one said a word. When we entered the courtroom, everything felt formal and tense. The judge began by reviewing the case and then asked my parents to explain why they believed I owed them this money. Their lawyer argued that I had a moral responsibility to support my sister and that my parents had made financial decisions based on my supposed promise. Then the judge started asking questions. Simple, direct questions. Did I sign any documents agreeing to pay the mortgage? No. Was there a written contract? No. Had any payments ever been made by me? Again, no. The judge then asked why they believed I would be legally responsible for a mortgage that wasn't in my name. My parents struggled to answer. My dad talked about family duty and sacrifice. My mom said they assumed I would help because I was financially stable. The judge listened, but didn't seem convinced. He reminded them that moral expectations are not the same as legal obligations. When it was my turn to speak, I explained my side calmly. I told the judge I had been saving to buy my own apartment and had never agreed to pay for Sarah's. I explained how the papers were handed to me without warning and how I refused immediately. I also mentioned that I had cut contact after being pressured and insulted. The judge reviewed the documents once more and then made his decision. He dismissed the case. He stated clearly that there was no legal basis for their claim and that I was not responsible for any part of the mortgage. He also warned my parents about filing lawsuits without proper grounds. I felt an enormous sense of relief. It wasn't joy, exactly, but release. The tension I'd been carrying for months finally eased. My parents left the courtroom quickly. Sarah didn't look at me. That was the last time I saw any of them in person. After that, I went back to my life. I stayed at my job, continued saving, and focused on myself. I didn't unblock their numbers, and they didn't try to contact me again. A few months later, I found a small apartment that fit my budget and started the buying process on my own. Looking back, the lawsuit was painful, but it also gave me clarity. It confirmed what I had felt for years, that my role in the family was never equal. Walking away wasn't easy, but it was necessary. For the first time, I chose myself. After the case was dismissed, I expected to feel angry or resentful for a long time. Instead, what I felt most was distance. Not just physical distance, but emotional separation. The lawsuit changed something permanently. It made it clear that my parents were willing to cross a line I never thought they would. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding my sense of normalcy. I kept going to work, stayed on my routines, and avoided thinking about my family unless I had to. There were moments when I felt sad, especially during quiet evenings, but I reminded myself why I had stepped away. Protecting my future had become more important than maintaining a one-sided relationship. Sarah never reached out again. From what I heard through extended relatives, she and Jake moved into the apartment and my parents continued helping them financially. That information didn't surprise me. It only reinforced the pattern I had lived with my entire life. I didn't feel jealous anymore. I felt detached. Over time, I completed the purchase of my own apartment. It wasn't as large or as new as Sarah's, but it was mine. Every payment I made felt meaningful because it was tied to my own effort and planning. For the first time, I felt secure without relying on anyone else's approval. People sometimes ask if I regret refusing to help or cutting off contact. The honest answer is no. Setting boundaries came at a cost, but it also brought peace. I learned that being responsible doesn't mean being responsible for everyone else's choices. Today, my life is quieter and more stable. I don't spend holidays surrounded by tension or unspoken expectations. I spend them in ways that reflect what I value now. Losing my family's support was painful, but gaining control over my own life was worth it. This experience taught me an important lesson. Love should never come with conditions that destroy your future. And family loyalty should never be enforced through pressure, guilt, or legal threats. A certified letter was mixed in with my usual bills and junk mail. The return address alone made my stomach drop. It was from a law firm I didn't recognize. Morrison, Klein, and Associates. My hands were shaking as I opened it. The letterhead looked formal and polished, but the content made me feel physically ill. "Dear Miss Tiffany Johnson," it began. It stated that the firm represented my parents, Robert and Linda Johnson, in a matter involving reimbursement for child rearing expenses. Child rearing expenses? I kept reading, confused and alarmed. The letter said my parents were suing me for $280,000. $280,000. They were demanding payment for raising me from birth to age 18. Food, clothing, housing, medical care, education, emotional support, everything. I had to sit down. This couldn't be real. Parents don't sue their children for raising them. That's absurd. But there it was, clearly written. They claimed I owed them this money because I was refusing to help the family in their time of need, despite their years of sacrifice. I read the letter 3 times, trying to process it. This wasn't really about raising me. It was about the apartment. They were trying to intimidate me into paying Sarah's mortgage. At first, I thought about driving straight to their house and confronting them, trying to reason with them. But then it hit me. That reaction was exactly what they wanted. They wanted me scared and desperate enough to give in. Instead, I called my friend Marcus. We went to college together, and he's a lawyer. If anyone could tell me whether this was as ridiculous as it sounded, it was him. "Marcus, it's Tiffany. I need help," I said. "What's going on?" "My parents are suing me for $280,000. I told him everything. The Christmas dinner, the apartment, the mortgage papers, all of it. He listened without interrupting. "Tiffany, that's insane," he said. "They can try, but it won't work. Parents are legally required to support their minor children. You can't charge someone for fulfilling a legal obligation." "So you think I'll win?" I asked. "I think this case will get thrown out immediately," he said, "but we need to respond properly. Don't ignore it." I felt slightly better after talking to him, but the shock remained. My own parents had actually taken legal action against me over Sarah's apartment. 2 months later, we were in court. I walked into the courthouse nervous but determined. Marcus was with me, carrying a briefcase full of documents. My parents were already there with their lawyer, a thin man in an expensive suit who looked uncomfortable. Sarah sat behind them, glaring at me. "All rise," the bailiff announced as Judge Patricia Williams entered. She was in her 50s, with short gray hair and a serious expression. "This is the case of Johnson versus Johnson," she said. "The plaintiffs are seeking $280,000 from the defendant for child rearing expenses." My parents' lawyer stood and explained their claim, that my parents had raised me and believed they deserved reimbursement, especially since I refused to assist the family financially. Judge Williams looked skeptical. She asked directly whether he was arguing that parents could charge their children for basic parental duties. He hesitated, tried to reframe it as a matter of ingratitude, but the judge wasn't convinced. Then she turned to Marcus. Marcus stated clearly that the case should be dismissed. He cited state law, explaining that parents have a legal duty to support their minor children and cannot sue for reimbursement of those expenses. The judge questioned my parents directly. She asked what financial support they had provided after I turned 18. They admitted they hadn't paid for college, housing, transportation, or any living expenses. I had been dependent. Marcus presented documents proving that I paid for everything myself, while my parents paid full tuition for Sarah and purchased an apartment for her. When asked if this was true, my parents admitted it. My mom said Sarah needed more help. Judge Williams pointed out the contradiction. They had supported one adult child extensively, helped the other not at all, and were now demanding money from the one they hadn't supported. My dad couldn't answer. The judge dismissed the case immediately. She ordered my parents to cover all court costs and attorney fees and called the lawsuit frivolous. The gavel came down. I felt relief, but also sadness. It was over, but the damage was permanent. The fallout from the lawsuit was immediate. News spread quickly through the family. The day after the hearing, Uncle Mike called me. He said he couldn't believe my parents had actually taken me to court and admitted that if anyone had known, they would have tried to stop them. Aunt Janet called next, then my cousins, and even people I barely knew. Everyone was shocked by what my parents had done. Grandma Rose called as well. She told me she had raised 5 children and never once thought about charging them for it. She said she didn't understand what kind of parents would even consider such a thing. Her reaction reflected what many others were thinking. The real damage, however, happened within my parents' led social circle. They had attended the same church for over 20 years. My mom was active in a women's group, and my dad helped organize fundraisers. These were people they had known for decades. After the lawsuit became public knowledge, the invitations stopped. Friends stopped calling. My mom was removed from her book club, and my dad was taken off the church board. Their reputation collapsed almost overnight. Financially, the situation was just as bad. They had hired an expensive lawyer and spent around $15,000 on legal fees for a case that was dismissed in a single hearing. On top of that, they were ordered to pay court costs. This was money they didn't have, especially after using most of their savings for Sarah's apartment down payment. 3 months after the trial, Marcus called me with an update. He told me my parents had been forced to sell Sarah's apartment. Without my money, they couldn't keep up with the mortgage payments. The apartment had already gone back on the market. I felt conflicted when I heard the news. Part of me felt justified, but another part felt sad for Sarah. She had lost the apartment, though the situation wasn't entirely her fault. She had trusted our parents' plan. Still, she had been willing to let me pay for it, which made it hard to feel too sympathetic. From what I heard, Sarah and her boyfriend moved into a small rental across town. The apartment she had planned her future around was gone. I acknowledged the loss, but I reminded myself that it was not my responsibility. Life slowly returned to normal. I focused on work, saved money, and spent evenings browsing apartment listings. I had even found a 2-bedroom place I seriously considered making an offer on. 6 months after the trial, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. I almost ignored it, but I answered. It was my mom. She said she wanted to talk and suggested we meet to move past everything and make peace. I told her I had nothing to say. She insisted it had all been a mistake and claimed they hadn't been thinking clearly at the time. I reminded her that suing me for $280,000 was not a simple mistake. She said they were family and should work through it. That's when I finally said what I had held in for years. I asked where that sense of family had been when I needed help with college, when I was starting my career, and when I was saving for my own home. She said they had supported me. I told her the truth, that they had supported Sarah, not me. I had always been labeled the responsible one who didn't need help. I pointed out that now, after Sarah lost the apartment, they suddenly wanted reconciliation. There was silence on the line. She asked if we could just move on. I told her no. I said they had shown me who they were, and I wasn't willing to pretend otherwise. Parents don't sue their children for raising them. Parents don't insult their daughters or demand that one child sacrifice everything for another. I ended the call by saying I was happy with my life and no longer needed their approval if it came with conditions. I hung up. She didn't call again. 2 months later, I closed on my apartment. It was exactly what I had worked toward for years: hardwood floors, large windows, and a kitchen with granite countertops. Everything I had imagined while saving carefully month after month. The down payment came from the same savings my parents believed I should have used to pay Sarah's mortgage. Instead, I invested it in my own future. I'm 33 now, still single, still focused on my career. Maybe my father was right and I'll never marry. But if independence is the outcome, I'm comfortable with that. I have my own home, my own stability, and control over my decisions. No one can pressure me into funding someone else's life or make me feel guilty for protecting my goals. I no longer live with constant expectations or emotional manipulation. My life is calm, intentional, and free from demands that once drained me. Sometimes I wonder if Sarah ever realized how badly our parents' plan failed. Instead of receiving a fully funded apartment, she ended up back in a rental, and my parents lost their reputation trying to force me to pay. But that realization, if it ever came, isn't my concern. What I've learned is simple. Walking away from people who don't value you is sometimes the healthiest choice you can make, even when those people are your own family.